Hi everyone, welcome to another great conversation from us here at NoraBox. It's great to have your company. I am always the host for these sessions. I'm so lucky because I always get to work with these fantastic experts. Today is no exception. But my name is Donna Stevenson. I have shoulder length brown hair and I'm wearing a grey NoraBox t-shirt. And as I say, it's great to have your company during this special awareness time for our Tourette syndrome community. Now, it's awareness time from the 15th of May to the 15th of June. They've got a fantastic campaign at the moment, so please do check it out, and we'll hear more from our experts in a minute about that, called the Misunderstood campaign, which aims to raise awareness for this often misunderstood neurological difference. I think we are aware that sadly surrounding Tourette syndrome, we've got a lot of misinformation and even stigma. And what this conversation aims to do today is amplify the voices from our friends at Tourettes Action, who do fantastic work there as a charity. We guesstimate that about 1% of us, so that's about 300,000 folks here in the UK, live with this neurodifference. But again, our experts are going to explain to us why. I think we feel that's probably a very conservative guesstimate, that this difference impacts way more of us across our communities than we've ever realised that it does. But you are not alone if this is you. And so I am joined by two fantastic experts. I'm going to introduce them now and we'll get chatting. We are joined by Ione Georgakis, who is Therapies and Advocacy Manager at Tourettes Action. Hi, Ione. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Donna. Thank you for having me on.
Well, it's a real pleasure. And we're also joined by Dr. Edward Palmer. Now, he is a psychiatrist and researcher at the University of Birmingham, but he's also a trustee at Tourette's Action as well. Hi, Ed. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Donna. Thanks so much for having us.
Well, it's going to be a really insightful conversation, and I can think of no better time to do it while we're in awareness time. So let's get started then, guys. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and your background, your area of expertise, and your own journey as well with Tourette's syndrome. So, Ione, may I come to you first with that question?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So, as Donna mentioned, my name's Ione and I'm the Therapies and Advocacy Manager at Tourettes Action, and I'm also an occupational therapist in the NHS. So I work part-time with Tourettes Action and I lead their training provisions and their advocacy and support services, which is a real honour and a pleasure for me. It's a role which I'm very, very passionate about, and it puts me in direct contact with our wonderful Tourette's community, but also I think quite importantly, the systems around them. So their employers, their educators, their healthcare professionals. So being able to work with the whole team. I have had tics since very early childhood. I was diagnosed with Tourette's in my teens. I have a family history of tics, and I feel very, very lucky to have found a professional kind of journey and route that allows me to kind of use that lived experience and also my professional experience to hopefully make the world a kind of more safe, enjoyable and easy to access space for people with tics, Tourette's and beyond. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on today.
No, it's our pleasure. Thank you. Dr. Ed, tell us a little bit about yourself then.
Thanks. So my name's Ed Palmer. As you said, I work as a training psychiatrist and researcher in the University of Birmingham. I see people and assess people with tics and Tourette's in addition to people with other conditions as well. And I've been a trustee at Tourette's Action for, I think, coming up to 8 or 9 years now, so a long time. And some of the work that I do there is working with Ione, particularly on our kind of training and outreach work and things like that. I also have Tourette syndrome. I've had tics ever since I was really little, about 3 or 4 years old. And my tics haven't changed very much over time, but I think my kind of capacity to live alongside my tics and embrace them has changed a lot as I've gotten older. And again, you're also really privileged to be here today chatting to you. So thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you. So let's go right back to basics, guys, because when I'm out and about training, I talk about Tourette syndrome. And a lot of people still don't really know what it is, or have got a very misguided idea, almost a trope of what we're looking at here. So for those folks who aren't sure about what actually is Tourette syndrome, and the ways it can impact on individuals. And you've both shared kind of how it can impact on you guys. Can we go right back to basics? What are we looking at here? And Ed, could I come to you first to take us through what actually is Tourette syndrome, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tourette syndrome is a neurological condition. Sometimes we call it a neurodevelopmental condition. And the main presenting symptom of Tourette's is something that we call tics. And tics are involuntary productions of either sounds or movements. So sounds can be really simple things like coughs or sniffing, all the way through to other kind of noises or words or even sentences and phrases. And then the movement tics, again, can be simple things like blinking your eyes or moving your shoulders, all the way through to much more kind of complex coordinated movement. So standing up, turning around, jumping, touching things and things like that. But we also know that Tourette syndrome often, and we might discuss this a bit more later, presents alongside other conditions as well. That's really common. Ione, do you want to talk a little bit more about some of the impact maybe of living with Tourette syndrome?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for introducing all things tics and Tourette's. And I suppose there's, as you mentioned earlier, Donna, there's a lot of myths that surround tics and Tourette's, and there's kind of a lot of there's a humour narrative, and there's this slightly sensational kind of centralisation of it. And really, I think the reality of tics and Tourette's is far less humorous. The day-to-day experience, Ed and I often talk about the kind of the primary impact and consequence often being pain for people, really small, repetitive, very, 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 very frequent movements that you don't necessarily have a rest or a break from. And, some people even tic in their sleep. So potentially this can be a 24-hour experience. And actually recent research has showed that this can happen in REM sleep, which is a time that most of us should not be able to be kind of moving and using that energy. So it has a big impact on daily participation. It can cause pain. It can cause some anxiety and some social challenges when there's misunderstanding and stigma around the condition. But on the other hand, on the other side of the coin, it can bring a lot of joy and creativity and playfulness and humor and social connection. It can bring you a community, and lots and lots and lots of strengths and skills are associated with tics and Tourette's, but also neurodiversity as a whole. So I think it's really important that we always aim to present this balanced representation of this, let's be honest, quite complex, nuanced condition.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that, guys. I think this will be a real eye-opener for folks who don't know a lot about this difference in that way, to listen to you talk. And on the back of that, I think my next question fits really nicely. We were talking about this before we just went live, about Billie Eilish talking about her journey with Tourette syndrome. Where do you think we're at then currently in terms of our understanding? I've shared with you that I meet a lot of folks who don't really know what this difference is. Where do you think you guys, your perceptions with Tourette's Action and that, what's coming through in terms of where we're at these days with this difference? How do we go about trying to raise awareness as well? Ione, can I come to you first with that question?
Yeah, of course. And I think it's a great question, Donna, because we are making progress. Ed and I often reflect on our childhood experiences and how there were there was a real lack of positive role models or kind of relatable role models whose experiences were represented on the screen. We were part of a generation of kind of Pete from Big Brother, who was obviously did amazing things for representing tics and Tourette's and for getting it out into the public eye, but with quite a specific one side of the condition. And we do still see this in the media. We see often a human narrative. We see a presentation of the really often quite extreme end of Tourette's, which is very important because it's a spectrum, of presentations and experiences, and that can change all the time. So we must represent all sides of that in order to make sure that young people, but people across the lifespan have positive role models, have people that they can relate to. There are certainly a lot of myths that still surround tics and Tourette's, and I have to say, one of the most common questions that I'm met with when I tell someone I have Tourette's is they say, "Do you swear?" And I say, yes, but it's not related to my Tourette's. It's related to strong feelings or bad drivers. They're separate, and it's definitely the most associated kind of go-to assumption when it comes to tics and Tourette's, and that's not wrong. A large, around 15 to 20% of people with Tourette's will have what we call coprolalia, which is the swearing component of that. But it certainly isn't the only side of the condition. And the risk is that if we only kind of show one part of it, then we alienate lots of other people, or other people don't see themselves represented. And that can actually become a barrier to getting diagnosed, because sometimes you might not have context for what your sounds and movements are. Ed, yours were called your habits, weren't you, when you were younger? Mine were called my catchphrases. They families often just kind of embrace and accept these differences, which is very important, but it can really help in taking that next step towards a diagnosis, to say, actually, that might be what's going on here. So yeah, I think we're getting there, but sometimes it can feel like a few steps forward and a few steps back. What has been lovely to see in as a charity, as an increased demand for training and for support services from schools, from employers, from healthcare boards who are trying to do it better, who recognise that this is an area of neurodiversity that they're less confident or upskilled or knowledgeable about, and they're coming to us to try and change that, which is all we can ask, really. That's how big kind of sustainable change can occur. So yeah.
And more power to you guys, because this is why we wanted to showcase this conversation. So NeuroBox stands with the work that you do. We're passionate about raising awareness in this way. Ed, can I come to you then? Ione's very eloquently talked through the journey, really, Tourette syndrome's at now, and yes, progress, but long way to go, I guess. What's your take on this then? Where are we at now? Where should we be heading around understanding and awareness?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think a couple of other kind of common misconceptions, along with the one that it's a condition really just about swearing, is that it's a condition just of childhood, and it's something that people will grow out of. And I think that's something that a lot of families, when they initially get the diagnosis, kind of maybe think is going to be true. We do know that the condition often improves for most people throughout childhood, particularly as they enter into adulthood. But there are a large number of people that will continue to live with their tics and Tourette's through to adulthood. And I think that's important to remember as well. And I think one of the other misconceptions is or things that people don't always appreciate, is that Tourette syndrome often presents with other conditions as well. So only about 10 to 15% of people with a diagnosis of Tourette syndrome receive a diagnosis just of Tourette syndrome. It more often than not presents with other what we call comorbidities or co-occurring conditions, the most common of which are things like ADHD, OCD, anxiety, but also depression and autism and sensory processing differences, executive functioning differences, sleep problems. So it's really common to present in a kind of cluster of presentations. And it may be that tics is someone's primary problem, or it may be actually that their ADHD is their primary problem as well. I think in terms of kind of next steps, it's breaking through to some of, we were talking about this before, weren't we, Donna? Breaking through to people that aren't already listening to this conversation. So breaking through to kind of the general public or the healthcare professionals that don't necessarily work within this sphere, but it'd be really helpful to know and understand and have an appreciation about.
Yeah. Very wise words. Thank you, Ed. And again, it's so insightful to hear you both share in this way. I think for a lot of us, we've not thought about Tourette's in these ways yet, which is interesting when we're so far advanced around neurodiversity as a whole. But for some reason, I think for a lot of folks, this neurodifference feels quite mysterious to them in terms of all the reasons that we've shared. Ed, what can we do then? We've started to kind of talk about this. What can we do to make a difference then? Ione was talking about training, education, because I'm head of training here, so I know the impact training can have. It's brilliant. It's about awareness, isn't it? Is that where it starts, kind of sharing out the messages and so on? What practical things can we do then to make a difference for this community?
Yeah, I think that's that. I think you're exactly right. It always starts with kind of education training. And I guess there's two kind of people that would be really great to tap into. The first is the kind of the general public. So I think what I would love to happen is, instead of, there's a person with Tourette's sitting on the train and maybe they're coughing or they're making some barking noises, instead of people going, what is that person doing? It'd be so great if we could have the general public go, oh, I bet that person's got Tourette's syndrome, so I know what's going on, and I'm just going to leave them to it. I'm not going to stare at them, or I'm not going to ask them to be quiet, and show compassion as well for that person. I think that's a place that I would really like us as a kind of as a population, as a group of people, to be in. And then I guess the second group is kind of more targeted education and training for specific groups that can really make a difference. So one example would be kind of teachers in training, for example. Rightly so, within the curriculum, there's quite a lot of training about some other neurodifferences, so autism and things like that. But there isn't actually any formal training as part of kind of teacher training on Tourette's syndrome. But that's when a lot of young people will start to have their symptoms or present, or the first kind of problems or issues or barriers they face will be within the education setting. So upskilling these kind of people that we know are going to be interacting with young people with tics and Tourette's would be just such a really brilliant place to start. And that is some of the work that we are doing as a charity. So we do offer kind of quite bespoke training for teachers and for schools. We have a education specialist that will happily kind of offer quite bespoke advice either to teachers in the school or to the student themselves. And some of the work that Ione and I do is also about training kind of healthcare professionals as well.
Thank you, Ed. Ione, can I come to you on the back of what Ed's just shared? Anything else to add about practical things we can try to start to do to make a difference?
Yeah, absolutely, Ed. You set the perfect foundation for that, and I'm going to jump in through the adult lens and look for how we support people across the whole lifespan. So we've been doing some amazing work with schools and educators for many years now, but one of our newer support offers is we're now working with employers. So we are providing employment training and awareness training, not only to businesses who have employees with tics and Tourette's, but also businesses who are looking to expand their general knowledge, not only to better serve customers and clients with tics and Tourette's, but also to make themselves more of an appealing employer for our neurodivergent community and people who have these experiences. And actually, when we explored the impact of these interventions and what we call it adjusting the social environment, we're trying to create safe schools, safe healthcare providers, and safe employers and businesses and public environments where people with tics and Tourette's can access these spaces and be their awesome, ticky, authentic selves without that internalized anxiety and that urge and that need to try and mask or hide their symptoms in order to fit in. And certainly in the work setting, that can be a real challenge, and that can be something that's quite tempting. And people report spending a lot of their energy on trying to hold their tics in and perform in a way that other people would deem acceptable. But actually tics, don't impact your ability to complete your job role, and they shouldn't. And so if we can train people around the individual, it kind of comes back to what Ed's saying. It enhances compassion, it enhances acceptance, it allows a space where tics are accepted and ignored almost in the same way that we would with any other part of our team's needs. So yeah.
Yes, it's fascinating to hear you talk, Ione, about masking. And this is something I'm learning from this conversation. I speak a lot about masking for some of the other neurodifferences, but I don't know why I've not actually thought about masking in this context. And it breaks my heart to think that the community is trying to mask their tics and so on in that way. I can just imagine how very draining that is and totally stressful as well. So for those who are listening who live with this difference, then what can we share, guys, in terms of inspiration, ideas? Over to you. Ed, can I come to you first about speaking to the community directly?
Yeah, so can I actually just pick up on your question about masking very quickly?
Yes,
first?
please.
Is that okay, Donna?
Honestly, this is news to me. I don't know why I've not thought about it in this context before.
It's one of the kind of interesting kind of aspects or hallmarks of Tourette's syndrome is that we have these kind of quite uncontrollable movements and sounds that we make. But some people do have the ability to what we call suppress, so hold in their tics, often just for a very brief period of time. And the ability to do that varies hugely from person to person. And I think that the reason I wanted to mention is because you mentioned exactly the right word, which is draining, which is in order to do that, to suppress or to mask, is extremely draining. It takes a lot of concentration. And I think lots of people either don't understand that, you know, it's involuntary, but yet you can hold them in, but it comes at a cost. It's extremely draining. It takes a lot of concentration. And often people get either very fatigued or they get a kind of increased burst of tics later after trying to hold them in. So I think it's a really kind of interesting aspect of the condition, but it's a really important one to understand. But you asked a bit about kind of some advice or comments for people who are living with the condition, and I think I would say is that you know, people with tics and Tourette's, we're brilliant, and we're not brilliant kind of in spite of our neurodifferences, but kind of because of them as well. We know that the people with tics and Tourette's, because of the way our brains are made up and work and structured, that we're more compassionate, we're more creative, we're more empathetic, we're better at multitasking. And we talked a little bit about representation, and sometimes it's difficult to see, but there are people who live and work and thrive with tics and Tourette's in every aspect of life. So we've mentioned a couple of famous people, you know, Billie Eilish and Lewis Capaldi, but it's everywhere. You know, I've met some a brilliant tree surgeon who's got tics and Tourette's, a brilliant hairdresser, an artist, someone who, you know, writes and creates music, doctors, academics, teachers. So, you know, I want people to be inspired and not set a ceiling for themselves. You know, people with tics and Tourette's are amazing, and it's partly because our brains are wired slightly differently that gives us this kind of superpowers as well. And life can be difficult, but life can be brilliant with tics and Tourette's as well.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Well, you and Ione are great role models, isn't it? You can't be what you can't see, and it is about representation in that way and being very open, if you're comfortable to do so, to speak of your differences, inspires others. As you both spoke about, you know, in your own childhoods, maybe not having those role models in that way, the importance of it. Ione, talk me through your messages to folks who live with this difference who are listening to this conversation. Hopefully they feel very inspired by it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as well on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to say, I love that quote. You can't be what you can't see. That's perfect.
So
That's
true,
beautiful.
isn't it? It is so true. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think Ed covered it really, really well. You know, kind of explore and celebrate and recognize your strengths and skills. We have, you know, research tells us that people who are neurodivergent receive such higher numbers of negative critical feedback from early kind of points in education, right up across the lifespan, right into the workplace. And that's not because they're not phenomenal and full of strengths and skills, but some of the challenges that come with these diagnoses can make it difficult to fit into spaces that are designed for neurotypical individuals, kind of quite ableist environments. And so recognizing that if you are struggling in an area of performance, whether that's education or socialization or in work, that's likely not simply down to you and your condition, but it's likely to being in an environment and a system that isn't appropriately supporting you. So reach out, do not feel alone. You know, so common for the adults who come to us for support to say, I've never met someone with Tourette's before. You're the first person I've met with Tourette's. And actually it can feel really, really lonely and really isolating. And I think, you know, 80% of the positive work we do is providing a space to normalize experiences and share experience and say, oh my God, you know, that happens for you. And this happened to me. And this experience at the supermarket was really tough. And how do I respond to my boss? And I've got this new tic and you know, this bit of skin's really irritated. Have you got any top tips? The power of community and connection just is so important. And I think if you're feeling alone, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling stretched, get in touch with us. Let us find a space within our support services that might be able to kind of, serve your needs and offer you some guidance and some connection there. Don't suffer alone. Definitely not. Please.
Yeah. Thank you. It's such a powerful message. And I think from our community, that idea of not being alone, it means so much to everybody. And I'm thinking as you guys are talking, for a lot of neurodifferences, they are hidden, they're invisible. But with Tourette's, sometimes it's very visible when people are ticking. It's very obvious that you live with this difference, isn't it? And it's not always easy to mask it, hide it. Not that you should, but for people who think, oh, I'm at the supermarket or whatever, I can imagine it generates a lot of anxiety because it's in every part of your life, isn't it? And you've both started to talk about, which I'm very grateful for, the work that Tourette's Action does. So first of all, right out the gate, I'd like to say thank you to that charity for its service to this community. Anything we can do at Neurobox to support the work you do, we are there for you. And part of it is this conversation, trying to support the work you do, especially during this special time. But beyond the training, and Ione, you've been talking about the networks and so on. Tell us a bit about the charity. When was it born? You know, what's its backstory a bit, and all the great work that you haven't mentioned so far about wonderful Tourette's Action. Ione, can I come to you first with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were born is a really wonderful question, and I should check our birth date on our calendar, and Ed might know better than me, but I believe we've been going for around 20 years.
Really?
I think longer, about 30 plus years, I think.
About marvellous. Thank you, Ed.
Sorry, I put you on the spot there asking about Tourette's Action's birthday.
Ask Uncle Google on the side here. But we're a relatively small charity. We serve the whole of the UK, and we support individuals with tics and Tourette's. But as we mentioned, we also support the systems around them, and that's really, really important to us. And as kind of Ed mentioned at the beginning, it's not that Tourette's is rare, but there are a real lack of specialist services, and there are lots of unique barriers to getting diagnosed. And when people get diagnosed, they've often waited a really long time for that diagnosis, and they're diagnosed and they're discharged in one appointment. So you can get this life-changing label, this whole new kind of perception of yourself, this whole new understanding what's happening here. And then there's no ongoing support potentially. And so often, both before diagnosis and post-diagnosis, we can provide that support. And that's what we aim to do as a charity, because we recognise that there is a lack of kind of statutory support for this condition. So as we kind of mentioned earlier, we do lots of training and workshops and awareness sessions. And that's so important, because if we can help parents respond suitably to tics and support their children with tics, that offers us a kind of sustainable in-home care. We do the same with employers, we do the same with educators, and public organisations. We work with the police, we've worked with health and social care organisations, and big national banks and organisations who say, how do we better serve the Tourette's community? Because there's lots of us, and we're certainly, we're good at accessing public spaces and spending money and joining businesses, but how can you accommodate us and our unique needs? But we also offer kind of other support services. So we have these amazing residential Tic Fest events that we put on a few times a year, and we have them for families, we have them for unaccompanied teenagers, and we have them for adults. And these are spaces where our Tourette's community can come together and play and authentically, loudly and proudly be themselves and connect with other people. And parents can meet other parents and share their experiences and advice. And young people leave those weekends, and adults leave those weekends saying, oh, they're life-changing, essentially, without kind of blowing our own trumpet too loudly. No, I'm going to blow the trumpet for this, because honestly, these events are just so incredible. And the impact that we see on young people after they've left and they have been able to connect and really be themselves is so long-standing. And they'll go off to school and they'll teach their peers about their condition, and they'll find a kind of voice for themselves. And I think that's I think one of the most important things that we offer. But we also have lots of kind of other support services and small grants and a help desk and advice panels. So just a few of the bits we do. But I will pass over to Ed to talk about some of the other kind of bigger projects that we also work on.
Well, thank you, Ione. And I think that's a brilliant summary of what we do. And just to second that the fests that we organise are just kind of magical, really. They're really, really wonderful. I think a bit of a focus and project for us at the moment is campaigning around access to medical care and support for people with tics and Tourette's. So Ione covered this really nicely, but just to add some numbers to it, over half of people wait for over a year to see someone to try and diagnose them. And 1 in 5, so 20%, are waiting over 3 years to see someone for a diagnosis. And I think most disheartening is Ione was right, over half of these people are given a diagnosis and discharged in the same appointment and offered absolutely no ongoing support. which is so disheartening, because there are a lot of things that we can do to help support and treat and manage people's tics and Tourette's. And so we're doing that in a number of ways, a kind of bottom-up approach to some of the training that we talked about, training healthcare professionals, but also trying to do a bit more of a top-down approach. So, we have a template on our website that you can download and send to your MP. So a level of campaigning to kind of Parliament. We've tried to have appointments, get this discussed in Parliament, in the Houses of Commons, reaching out to healthcare secretaries, but also targeting certain and advocating for certain changes at certain kind of bodies. So NICE, for example, trying to get some really thorough clinical guidelines for Tourette syndrome, and that's something that we're campaigning for at the moment as well.
Thank you, guys. It sounds like you're with folks every single step of the way, in whatever way that they need you to be there for them, which is amazing. Again, thank you to you as individuals, but also to the broader team at the charity. Your work is it's heartfelt. It truly is, and desperately needed by the sounds of it. So yeah, it's really heartening, but we still got a long way to go. So anybody listening to this, please do support the work of Tourette's Action, especially at this special time. We've got the Misunderstood campaign. Don't forget, go and check that out. We'll be sharing that on our channels as well. I know we've already done so. We'll continue to do that. Guys, this conversation's gone really quick, too quick. So we're on our last question already. Closing thoughts then. So as we turn our mind to, I know it's not always about awareness times, because every day should be awareness time. But during the special times that we have, maybe a deeper dive into certain communities, it does help, because maybe there's a focus on particular issues. And at the minute, it's of course Tourette's. With all that in mind then, Ione, and I'll come to you as well, Ed, if that's okay. But for those who are listening, and as I said to you guys, we have people from many different reasons listening to our chats. It can be somebody who's got that lived experience, wants to find out more for themselves, for their families, organisations who think, right, we don't know much about this, we want to find out more. So lots of different reasons people tune in. Closing thoughts then, Ione, that you'd like to share with folks who are listening?
I think we've covered lots of it as we've gone, but it's great to see to embrace and get new people involved in our awareness campaigns. We've got really wonderful awareness within our community, but kind of reaching new audiences feels very important. So accessing us on social media and engaging with our campaign and sharing that beyond is really, really positive. Hosting awareness days. Sometimes it can be as simple as displaying a poster in your waiting room, or booking us in for some future training and inviting, as many people from your organisation as possible. We have an amazing Tourette's friendly scheme, and that is for educators, it's for businesses, and it's for employers and organisations. And it's a way of upskilling and training your staff, and then being kind of categorized as a Tourette's friendly organisation. And so our community know that you're a safe space to access for support or for customer services and things like that. And yeah, like you said, have a watch of our amazing Misunderstood campaign, which was such a joy to film and has a really, really powerful message. I think someone described it as bringing Tourette's to life, which I thought was a really lovely, lovely description of the music video.
Yeah, love it. Thank you, Ione. Ed, can I come to you? You talked earlier about the compassion element and the importance of that. We talk a lot these days about being kind and understanding. What are your final thoughts then for the folks who are listening to this?
I think just that. I think having some understanding of what the condition is, and I think some of the things that we've talked about today. So having a deeper understanding and not kind of falling foul of some of those misconceptions, and then just kind of embracing and showing compassion to people living with this neurodifference and everyone around you. And then I think echoing kind of just what Ione said, which was, that the charity does so much. And if you've got an interest or you want to learn more, then we'll have something that we can do for you, whether that's training or anything like that. So yeah, and thank you for you, Neurobox, for hosting us today, because this has been such a brilliant platform for us. So thank you.
Our absolute pleasure, and it truly is. Thank you to everybody who's just listened to that conversation. We hope that you found it informative. As I said, think there's a lot of us who have a lot of misconceptions about what this neurodifference is. We hope this conversation has helped. We do know that what does help is the work that Tourette's Action does. So again, many thanks to our experts and the team over in that wonderful charity for this conversation and the continued work that they do. So Ione, thank you very much. I don't know if you want to say a quick bye-bye to everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening, Donna. Thank you so much for inviting us to join and speak today. It's been fabulous.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Thank you. And Ed, if you want to say bye to everybody.
Just bye everyone. Thanks so much for anyone that's kind of tuned in and listened. And again, thank you, Donna and Neurobox, for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys. And thank you all for listening as always. We appreciate the support. Until next time, we'll see you again. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.